20 minutes, give or take, and then we'll have time for question and answer sessions. So take it away.
Just real quick, so everybody is aware, we are recording this session. So just so you're aware, we are recording.
We are recording.
On the record, as we like to say at the State Department. Well, I just want to say thank you for the warm invitation to Konstantin and to Nick and the team. It's a pleasure to be amongst young people who are really interested in careers in foreign policy. My name is Mignon Houston, and I have been a diplomat for 15 years. I started right after graduate school, and my first assignment was in Mexico, in Guadalajara, at the US consulate. I then wanted to learn French, so they sent me to Yaoundé, Cameroon, which is in Central Africa. My third assignment was in the Philippines, in Manila. And then I returned to DC to work for, at that time, we had a special envoy for Sudan and South Sudan, working on a peace agreement in South Sudan, and I was his speechwriter. And then my next assignment in DC was to cover the Caribbean, so 21 Caribbean countries and our 7 US embassies there. And right before this assignment, I was in Cape Town, South Africa, at the US consulate there. And currently, I am now here in Miami, I guess here in Miami for me. And my entire 2-year assignment will be to serve as a recruiter, to talk to young people like yourselves about all of the career opportunities at the Department of State, our internships and our fellowships that pay for graduate school. So today's presentation is on just that. And then I'll open it up for questions. We'll talk about all the things that you might have questions about: lifestyle as a foreign service officer, the test, the application process, all those questions we'll get into today. So welcome to everyone. Thank you for your interest, and we'll jump right in. Share my screen for everyone. I like to say that initially, I think the main question is, how do you get into the career as a diplomat or foreign service officer? Most people know that it's a competitive process. It can be very daunting, and that's all true, but there are lots of ways, lots of different paths into the State Department. And so we're going to go through all of those today. Let's see here. First, I think it's helpful to just look at some context around the Department of State. Of course, the Department of State is one of 15 executive branches of our federal government. It was actually the first administrative arm of our federal government. It was created in 1700s. Our first Secretary of State was Thomas Jefferson. And just for some context, he oversaw 4 clerks, a translator, and a messenger at 2 diplomatic posts. Let's fast forward 250 plus years to today, and we have 270 missions now in 190 countries. We have 77,000 employees that work for the Department of State. And that number not only includes our US diplomats like myself, but it also includes our civil service officers, and they man our headquarters in Washington and some of our US offices around the United States, as well as our local staff that help with all of our efforts in our US embassies and consulates abroad. And the picture on the right, of course, looks a lot different from the picture on the left, right? We are continuing to recruit for diverse groups of people, and not just diverse with gender and ethnic background and religious background, but also in geographic location, coming from different places in the United States, and experience. Some diplomats come in with a political science degree, but others come in with an English background or a theater background. We really want our diplomatic corps to be as diverse as the United States, because that is our greatest strength, right? That's our superpower, our diversity in the United States. And so we use that often abroad when we are trying to build alliances and cooperation. So as all of you know, as our savvy political science and international relations studies students, we have our Chief Foreign Affairs Advisor, who's our Secretary of State. I love this quote from him that he used in his remarks on March 3rd, where he said, "Not a single global challenge can be met by any one nation acting alone. That it's the role of the Department of State and America's diplomats to engage around the world and build that cooperation." And that's essentially what we do, right? We are here to serve as sort of partners to the president in building relationships abroad. And we do that in a number of ways. To become a US diplomat, there are 5 tracks, or 5 cones, we like to call them, that we typically work in. And I bring these up because before you even take the exam, the first thing you have to do is select a cone. That is going to be the track that you work in through the entirety of your career. You have an opportunity to have some jobs or some assignments, as we might say, outside of your cone. But for the majority of your time, in order to get promoted and to show that you're successful in the job, you will take on jobs within the cone you select before you even start. So that's why it's important to really think through these 5 cones and decide which track is best with your skill set, fits best with your background and your interests. So today we're going to go through these tracks. That way you have a full understanding of what they do and to see which one makes the most sense for your background. All right, we're jumping right into it now. So our first cone are consular officers. Our consular officers have 2 types of jobs they do. Typically, they are going to be working with our emergency services for Americans. And then they're also doing this job, which is making judgment calls on the eligibility of a foreign national to travel to the United States. As you can see in the picture on the left, you have individuals who are lined up in our consular section waiting for their visa interview. The individual in the middle, the young lady there, is a US diplomat. She's interviewing this couple here to see if they're eligible to travel to the United States, asking them specific questions about their background and their motivations for traveling to the United States. If during the interview she ascertains that they are eligible, then they will be offered a US visa. And this is your first document, of course, to travel to the United States. As a consular officer, typically we all come in and do our first tour as a consular officer. So my cone is public diplomacy, but my first assignment in Mexico, I was adjudicating somewhere between 116 to 125 visas a day. And so that's, it's all day speaking in that language to families, to individuals about their motivations for coming to the United States. So it's a fantastic job, but it is a lot of upfront communication in a different language. The second aspect of a consular officer's role is what I initially mentioned, which is working with American citizens and supporting them if they need any emergency services. So for instance, on the picture on your left, you have an individual who just happened to have a bad day, and whatever he did has sort of caused him to be in jail in this now foreign country. He would need to get in touch with his US embassy or consulate. And why would he do that? He'd get in touch with us because someone in the American Citizen Services Office, one of our consular officers, will make sure that he has a list of English-speaking lawyers, if he needs one, that he's been able to get his phone call home, that he's being treated fairly, what the condition is for him while he's being obtained here. And so those are the types of relationships consular officers build when there's someone who gets in trouble abroad. The middle picture, you have a couple. They have found love abroad, and one of the partners wants to bring the now foreign national to the United States. So in order to get an immigrant visa for her partner or his partner, he would need to go to the US consulate or the US embassy to comply with those immigration laws. The third picture is someone who's also having a bad day. Their passport was stolen, their wallet was stolen. If you're abroad in Paris or you're abroad in Cameroon and something like that happens, you will need to go to the US Embassy. And a consular officer will make sure you have an emergency passport to get back home. And if you're out of funds and you're not able to get in touch with a relative to send you money or to wire you money, then there's an opportunity for the consular officer to work with you to get enough funds to be able to sustain yourself until you can get back home and then repay the consulate or the embassy back those funds. So that's just a brief description of consular officers. Political officers. Now, often individuals who are political science majors think, okay, this is the cone for me. But to be honest, we have political officers who come from all disciplines. Political officers are essentially our negotiators. They are the ones who advise on international issues abroad. They keep a close eye on the political climate. They will be working closely with civil society, with government officials, with political parties, with different NGOs, just trying to get a feel for what's going on politically. If there's a coup that could be coming up, or there's some form of civil strife, a political officer needs to have some awareness of this so they can report that to the ambassador or the consul general and have that report get to Washington so the Secretary of State can inform the president. They also are arms on the ground dealing with foreign policy. So political officers are going to help draft the policy with their counterparts in Washington and help implement that policy in said country. Political officers also work closely with government bodies in the country if they're interested in helping their legal team have more sort of expertise and accountability and rule of law. Political officers will bring experts from the United States, judges, lawyers, to that country to help build that knowledge base in the country they're working in as well. Economic officers. Our economic officers or our econ officers, these officers are responsible for helping to build trade relationships. So they're going to work closely with US companies, helping them to come to the foreign country where they're currently working. They'll sort of start those negotiations or those conversations. They also work with entrepreneurs, with civil society as well. They'll help work on fair trade agreements. If the White House decides they want a fair trade agreement between a couple of countries, it's an economic officer who will help work on that objective. Economic officers also cover a portfolio that we call our environmental, science, technology, and health portfolio. So they will report back to Washington on climate change issues, on anything dealing with malaria or HIV/AIDS issues, on science issues, maybe it's satellites or solar power panels or those sorts of things. The economic officer will also report back to Washington on those items as well. The third cone, I guess, are we on three? I think we're on three, is the public diplomacy officer. This is my cone. I am a public diplomacy officer. I'm responsible for engaging and informing opinion leaders, government officials, civil society about US foreign policy. So if there's a policy from the White House, I will speak to the press, a picture here on the left, speaking to a journalist in South Africa. I'll speak to the press about our foreign policy, answer any questions about it. That language is not something that I make up myself. It's language that comes down from the White House. It's been cleared several times. It's ready to go live, and I'm the one who would deliver it in that foreign language if need be in the country. We also work with students abroad. The US government has a number of scholarships and fellowships that we provide to foreign students to study in the US. And we do that because we know it's important to build those relationships. If an individual from the Philippines studies their master's in the United States on a Fulbright scholarship, we know when that individual returns to the Philippines, and they're a strong partner for us. They have studied in our universities, in our libraries, they've done research and conducted science experiments in our laboratories, they've built networks, and that individual is a good person to then work with if we want to improve certain things in our relationship together. So the picture in the center was a college fair that I held in South Africa, and we had about 45 recruiters from US colleges come down to South Africa for Cape Town's first college fair. So that was a success. The third picture is something else that we do as public diplomacy officers. We bring out cultural envoys. So someone like Misty Copeland or US scientists or US poets or authors, we bring them to the country we're working in. We showcase American culture. We put on performances and concerts to showcase that, if there are folks in the country that may not believe in our policy, they might not have a problem coming to a jazz concert or to a bluegrass concert. And that just allows us to do what we call soft diplomacy, to build relationships abroad in a way that's not so politically strong, but maybe on the softer side, using culture as a tool. Our last cone that we'll talk about is the management officer cone. These are essentially our chief officers in the embassy when it comes to being responsible for our human resources, our financial resources. They ensure that our diplomats, like myself, when I go abroad, that my house is in order, that it's secure, that it's in a location that is deemed appropriate, and they will help us with our staff development, our promotions. They are essentially the nuts and bolts of our embassy, and they take care of all the logistics of our personnel. So that's also, it's a large management responsibility. Why it's called the management officer, but it's a fantastic role as well. So those are the 5 cones we talked about. What are the benefits, right? So of course you get to see the world, you get to create these global, bilateral and multilateral networks, you get to build international collaboration, which is all great. But one of my favorite benefits to being a US diplomat is the language. So as a diplomat, if you come in with the language, you come in with Spanish or you come in with Arabic, that's fantastic. But say you want to work in Japan or you want to work in a country and use Farsi. In that instance, you would apply to work for one of those jobs. And if selected, then you would then be given language training. And the language training is by far the best language training I've ever experienced. For our Romance language, it's 6 months in a classroom with 3 other students and a native speaker. You're being paid a full-time salary to learn nothing but that language. It's like a job, and you'll be tested throughout the course of those 6 months on your tracking, on your status. And then once you are at a level of proficiency, what we call professional proficiency, you can read the newspaper, you can speak to a journalist, you can talk to someone in the government's office in that language, then you're pretty much ready to go, particularly for the Romance languages, to your post. And if it's a harder language than a Romance language, more difficult language, then you get not just 6 months, but you get a year of training. And that's a very strategic way of making sure you're in a good place to use a more difficult language. So the language training is fantastic. There's also a student loan repayment program. We, as the US government, offer up to $60,000 total for student loan repayment. You can get it in increments. I think it's 8,000 to 10,000 a year if you remain in the service, and a total of up to 60,000. There's also housing. When we're abroad, our housing is paid for by the US government. So your salary does not have to go to your rent or your mortgage. It is totally being covered by the US government, and it's pretty nice housing. Often diplomats will have pools and just great 3 or 4 bedroom houses, depending on how large your house is. So the housing is pretty swanky. We get family leave. I just recently got married and had a baby and had my maternity leave paid for, which is great. And we get home leave, which means in between assignments, we have the ability to come home and reacclimate to the United States before going out again to our next abroad assignment. We also get paid holidays. Not only do you get the holidays, US holidays, like we have Veterans Days, holiday coming up, but you also get holidays for the local country, which is great. And so lots of benefits to being a diplomat. The salary, we can talk about that if there are questions. Essentially, it's based on a grading scale. So you come in with an associate's degree or college bachelor's degree or PhD, your pay will go up, and it will continue to increase as you remain in the service. So, you can come in on average starting out, around 60,000, 50, 60,000, and then move up to 100+ thousand as a U.S. diplomat, depending on how long you stay in. What are the eligibility requirements? Okay, so we'll jump into these next. You must be a U.S. citizen, and you have to be at least 21 years old when you start and no older than 59. All academic disciplines are welcome. And I can't stress that enough, because I want to make sure folks who come in with an English background or a history background also consider being a US diplomat abroad. You don't have to have a specific background, and all of the jobs that I just talked to you about, being a consular officer or a public diplomacy officer or political officer, you will receive job training before you go out to your assignment in those areas. So you don't have to have those skills ahead of time. No educational requirement. We actually have officers who come in, most of them come in with a bachelor's degree, but you can have an associate's degree. You can come in, you don't have to have a college degree to be a US diplomat. There's no foreign language requirement either. So if you don't come in with the language, we will train you. If you do come in with the language, that's a plus, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The application process. Now, if there are questions in the chat, I haven't opened the chat to see them, so I will take a look right after the presentation about the questions. But let's talk about the application process, because this is what I think is the most daunting for folks. We tell people to give yourself about a year from the time you decide you want to apply to the time you are selected to serve as a US diplomat. And why does it take so long? So let's go through the steps. The first step, as I mentioned, is to choose that career track. And if you're not sure, after today's presentation, we have on our careers.state.gov, which the address is down on the right side of your screen. We have a quiz that you can take to see which track might fit your experience and your interests best. So the first step is to choose a career track. After you've selected a career track, the second step is to register for what we call the Foreign Service Officer Test. Now, this is a test that causes lots of angst and anxiety. It's honestly a general knowledge exam. There are essentially 3 parts. There's a section on your sort of judgment, situational judgment. There's a section on sort of management experience, and there's a section on English expression. And then there's also a written aspect of the test. There's a number of ways to study and prepare for the Foreign Service Officer test. The majority of folks that I work with who have passed the test come back and tell me that they were very involved with trivia on campus, and they just had good working knowledge of a number of different things. They also just were avid readers of all kinds of information. So not only are you keeping up with the New York Times and the Washington Post, but you're also reading Foreign Policy magazine. You're also reading The Economist. You're reading Forbes magazine. There might be a question on the test dealing, of course, with economics, with geography, and with history, right? We've had some questions on the test that deal with US history, US culture. And so just reading a lot, different periodicals, different newspapers will help you feel more comfortable with the exam itself. After you've registered for the Foreign Service Officer test and you take the exam, at that point, you will have to submit what we call personal narratives, and they will be reviewed with your Foreign Service Officer test score. Now, the personal narratives take a look at your background, and I see a hand raised. Let's see. But okay, let's see. I'm not sure if I can check with the person who raised their hand, or if you can just pause for just a second.
If it's just a quick question, that's
Okay,
fine
go
to
ahead, I
take
can
it.
hear you.
But like, I think if it's going to be a long-standing thing, we should just hold off until the end of the presentation.
It was actually just a quick comment.
Yeah.
So I just took the FSOT, the
Okay.
Foreign Service test, and I was required to submit the narratives before taking the test.
Right,
Just
right.
in order of these steps.
Right, so that's a new step. So and I think because of that, they don't have that listed in this chart. But as the gentleman just said, currently you choose a career track when you apply, and then they will send you, Pearson VUE will send you a list of 6 personal narratives. You fill out your personal narratives, and then you register for the Foreign Service Officer test. So let me know if that was your process. After you've taken the exam, based on if you pass the exam or not, that is when they will read your personal narratives. So your narratives are never read prior to the exam. They're only read if you pass the test. And if you pass the test with a passing score, it doesn't matter how high your score, just that you passed, your narratives will be read, and they will review your essay that you drafted during the actual exam. And that is all being reviewed by what we call a qualifications evaluations panel, the QEP panel. And based on your narratives, your score, and your essay, you will then be invited to take the oral assessment. And the oral assessment is essentially an all-day exam where it's always in Washington. You are in a room with other interested individuals in becoming Foreign Service officers. If you can be in groups of 6 up to 10, and essentially it's an opportunity for you to showcase that you have what it takes to be a Foreign Service officer. And we'll talk about some of those skills towards the end of the presentation. The oral assessment has several scenarios, interviews. It also has a written essay. If you pass the oral assessment, you will know that day. They will let you know if you pass, and then you will start your medical clearance and your security clearance, your background check and your medical check. And then you will be passed on. And once you clear both of those, that's the step that actually takes the longest, your security clearance, to the suitability review panel, where they will make a determination if you're suitable based on everything that they have in your package. And then you will be placed on what we call the register. And the register is where individuals who are selected, once they're put on the register, they're then selected to start in the next Foreign Service Officer training class. And so that's a really quick way of describing everything. We can go into detail about the security clearance. I know sometimes there are questions about that, but essentially with the security clearance, they're just checking your background. They want to know that there's nothing in your background that could hinder the United States if you were working on behalf of the United States. So do you have a criminal record, any drug or alcohol abuse in your background? Financially, are you sound? Do you have any student loans that you have defaulted on? Are you not paying taxes? How's your credit? Do you have friendships with foreigners that could be questionable to the US government? Those sorts of things will be looked at in detail during your security clearance. And your medical clearance is just to make sure that you are medically in a position to be worldwide available, which all US diplomats have to be worldwide available. All right, so that was a brief overview of the Foreign Service Officer, what we call the generalist track. We also have at the State Department Foreign Service Specialist. And so if you are an engineering background or you have, you're coming in as a clinician or a psychiatrist or an IT professional, we need you as well in our US embassies and consulates abroad. And we will give you our US diplomat Black passport. You will be a part of our diplomatic team. You're considered a US diplomat as well, but a specialist. These specialists come in with the backgrounds that you see listed, and they typically come in with 3 to 5 years of experience. So they're not coming in straight out of college. They have a special skill. They are subject matter experts in their special skill. And in each one of their assignments, when they move around to different countries, they will remain in that specialty. So they don't change from IT to medical because they come in with that special skill. So, and each of the specialists, they have a very different way of entering. Their exams are different, their process is different. And so I'm not going to go into detail about all of these, but you can find them on careers.state.gov if you're interested in one of the specialty tracks. Law enforcement, office management, our English language programs, all of these individuals are part of our team abroad, and we could not do our work without them. Now, often I'm speaking to classes that have students who are interested in law school, and I always advise them, by all means, go to law school first and then come into the Foreign Service. We have officers who are previous lawyers, and they just make fantastic officers. They're strong writers, they're strong negotiators, and we do have an Office of Legal Advisor in Washington, D.C. So they don't travel, they're not, they're civil service, but they are our attorneys who are really on the forefront of all of our international negotiations, our agreements, our peace agreements, our trade agreements. They review our documents to make sure they are legally sound and in order. And so if you're thinking about law and you'd like to do something like that, but maybe not travel around, the Office of Legal Advisor might be a good, suitable option for you in Washington, D.C. as a civil service officer. Now, here's a section that I think is important for our students. We have a number of interns. And why are these important? Well, it's important because often, in order to be looked at for a career in the Foreign Service, it's nice to have some opportunity to say you've worked in a policy office, particularly one that deals with international or foreign policy. The State Department has 3 primary internships that we offer, and right now, these are all virtual. So if you are in Florida, this is the best time to apply for our internships, because before you'd have to travel to DC. The first one is the US Department of State internship program. This program is our only unpaid internship program. But I say that because it's virtual, so that's fine now, but it's for 40 hours a week for 10 weeks. So it's a substantive internship. You are working directly with a policy office or a geographic office, maybe covering African affairs or Middle Eastern affairs. And you have substantive portfolios that you're working on. And this internship will allow you to really build your resume in foreign affairs. Now, the internship is open in September, so the deadline has already passed. But think about it for next September. This internship is for undergraduate students, and you have to have a 3.0 GPA to apply, but we select around 450 interns for this program a year. So it's a large internship program that we offer. The second internship is called the US Foreign Service Internship Program. This is a paid internship program, but it's much more competitive. We select 45 a year, 40 primary with 5 alternates. The internship provides for 2 summer programs. So the first summer is 10 weeks in Washington, D.C. with a policy office. And the second summer is with a US embassy or consulate abroad. And you have to have a 3.2 GPA for this internship. And this internship is open in July. So think about looking for this internship in July. Our third internship, we've had virtual student interns since prior to the pandemic. This is a great way to work with the policy office, particularly if you are a student athlete or you're working and going to school and you just don't have the time for 40 hours a week. This virtual internship, you only have to commit 10 hours a week. You get one project and it's from September to May. So it's a long amount of time, but shorter amounts of hours, if that makes sense. And this is also a great internship program. And they typically say one project, but during that time frame, you will receive numerous projects, and you'll be on staff meetings with the policy office. You will attend any of the speaking engagements. You'll take notes for meetings. You will help write reports and draft cables. And so it's a substantive internship as well, just less hours per week for those who are interested. And this internship is open in August. Okay, so now we're hitting the student programs. We have a number of student programs. Two that I want to start off talking about are Pickering and Rangel Fellowships. Many of you might be aware of these fellowships. The Pickering and Rangel Fellowships were created to bring in more underrepresented groups into the Foreign Service, particularly folks who are outside of Washington, D.C. and New York, who often hear about the Foreign Service. So we're talking women and people of color and folks who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, right? So that can be anyone, even if it's someone who's not of color and not a woman. The Pickering and Rangel Fellowship essentially do the same thing when it comes to benefits. So they provide financial assistance for your master's program, so your first and second year of your graduate program. And that includes books, it includes tuition, it includes your room and board. It also provides funding for 2 summer internships, one in the United States. The Pickering is with a policy office at the Department of State, and the Rangel is with a congressional office. And your second year summer internship will be abroad at a U.S. embassy abroad. And after completing your second summer internship, you finish graduate school, you've completed your second summer, you will then start in the September class as a Foreign Service officer. And you have up to 5 years to complete your sort of requirement, your financial requirement as a Pickering or Rangel. If you pass the Foreign Service exams, then you can continue on as a Foreign Service officer. So these are excellent opportunities. I came in as a Pickering Fellow. They're excellent opportunities to really get your foot in the door in the Foreign Service. Pickering Fellows and Rangel Fellows come from outstanding universities. They have a number of languages in their background. So it's a very competitive fellowship. We select 45 each year, 45 Pickerings and 45 Rangels each year. And so I can't talk about them enough. If you are a junior or a senior, if you're a junior, start preparing yourself. But if you're a senior, definitely think about applying for one of these 2 fellowships to support your graduate degree, but also to come in to the Foreign Service with us. Another fellowship we have, which is fairly new, I want to say it started in 2014, is our Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. Very similar to the Pickering and Rangel, where it pays for graduate school with 2 internships. The difference is with the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship, it also pays for your junior and senior year of college. So if you are a sophomore or freshman, really think about this Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. And after you complete your graduate degree, then you would come into the Foreign Service as a IT management specialist. So a specialist track in IT. So if you're interested in cybersecurity, telecommunications, any other IT related field, this might be a fellowship that would interest you. We also, if we have any veterans on the call or anyone who's currently thinking about military service, we have a fellowship to help bring in our veterans into the Foreign Service. It essentially takes folks who have an advanced degree and it gives them a year, 12 months of mentorship and training support to help them transition into a potential position with the Department of State. And if being abroad may not be something that you're ready to do, but you are intrigued with the idea of working on foreign policy and supporting our embassies abroad, but from the United States, the Pathways program is for interested students and recent graduates. We have a recent graduates program as well, to join us, but on the civil service side, so working in Washington, D.C. And the Pathways programs, these internships are paid. They are for high school students, 16, all the way up to recently graduated from graduate school within the last 2 years. And so you can look at the Pathways internships programs. They are fantastic internships. You will find them on usajobs.gov. And what I recommend to students is to go ahead and start a profile on USA Jobs. You can begin by, uploading the type of resume that they request into the platform and having your transcripts available and identifying the types of jobs or internships you would like to receive notifications about. And what will happen is you'll receive a ping when a Pathway student internship application is open. And that way your profile is already set. All you have to do is fill out the application and send it off. Because often some of the internships and job applications have very short windows for the deadline. Some of them can be as short as 10 days. So if you're interested in federal jobs across our federal agencies, and you're thinking about going in USA Jobs to look for any vacancies, definitely set yourself up and have that profile ready. So that's the Pathways program. The Presidential Management Fellow is another Pathways program. And I say that because it's what we call a pathway to State Department careers. It is also for advanced degree students. Those who come in with a PhD can look at the Presidential Management Fellows program. It is a 2-year sort of mentorship training program that is also paid in Washington. Fantastic, but also very competitive program as well. And the last program I'll speak to you guys today about is our Consular Fellows program. So the Consular Fellows program was created to sort of fill a gap for us. When we were working abroad, we realized we just needed more visa officers. We needed more consular officers on the line interviewing folks because the demand had become so high. And we particularly needed people who had language experience in Arabic, Mandarin, Portuguese, or Spanish. And so this program was created to allow folks to come in for 5 years. So it's a limited non-career appointment, right? You can come in for 5 years if you speak this language and serve as a US diplomat abroad in one of our consular sections in our US embassy or consulates abroad. Now, the language ability is a question that I get often. Arabic and Mandarin have pretty similar requirements. So for Arabic and Mandarin, your writing needs to be at an elementary level of proficiency. And that is, in our terms, just means that you can read Mandarin and Arabic at a level where you can read street signs and names and numbers and decipher sort of simple text. On the speaking side, we need it to be at a limited proficiency level. So this means you can sort of answer very simple commands and give very simple commands. That's for Arabic and Mandarin. The Portuguese and the Spanish requirements are a little higher. For Portuguese, it is above limited. They're looking at you having sort of a little stronger proficiency in both reading technically and in speaking, and in Spanish, stronger than that. In Spanish, they're looking for professional proficiency. So that would be someone who can read the newspaper, read more complicated text, and also speak to someone at a higher level in a government office. So it's someone who has a level of language ability that they feel comfortable speaking to someone who is at a higher sort of profession. So that's a little bit about where the scores. And for the Consular Fellows program, if you're interested, what you would do is you would fill out an application for the Consular Fellows program, and then you will take a Consular Fellows written exam, and it's going to be similar to the Foreign Service written exam, general knowledge questions dealing with sort of what would you do if situations, and a lot of the examples they use are examples that come from consular sections abroad. Then you will be tested in the language as well. And after passing the written, you take your test in the language. If you meet those scores, you'll also take the oral exam, which has similar questions around what a consular officer would experience in a consular section. And once you pass the oral, then you will also be invited on as a consular fellow abroad. So we've talked a lot about the internships, the fellowships, and the careers. I wanted to leave or end the presentation by showcasing what we're looking for in US diplomats and any of our officers that work abroad. And it's essentially what we call 13 dimensions. Now, the 13 dimensions, excuse me, these are how we hire diplomats. It's how we're promoted as diplomats. It's what we're looking for when we select consular fellows, specialists. We are looking to see, does your background have any of the 13 dimensions in it? Have you sort of showcased that you have these skills? Because these are the skills that make successful diplomats. And when we speak to all of these, we're talking about a number of different things. So for instance, when we talk about composure, we're asking, do you have the ability to remain calm in a stressful environment? We talk about cultural adaptability, which of course all of you are pretty aware, but also, are you able to work with groups that may not share your same beliefs when it comes to not only just politics, but also religion and culture as well? What's your motivation for joining the Foreign Service? And we're looking at that. Does your background, academic and professional, show that your experiences have been, you've been building on experiences because you've been motivated to become a US Foreign Service officer? We're looking at information integration and analysis. And this is essentially, can you draw from a variety of different sources to put together a concise sort of opinion or report? Initiative and leadership. What sort of leadership skills have you showcased in your academic background that would be useful in the Foreign Service? Your judgment, can you discern what's appropriate and when? Objectivity and integrity, how fair are you? And have you demonstrated examples in your background that showcase your ability to make fair decisions? Oral communication. Here we're looking at folks who can just really speak in a way that's concise and clear, but also with nuance as well. Planning and organizing. This means, how well in your background have you showcased that you can plan and organize events, programs, strategies. Quantitative analysis is essentially sort of recognizing patterns. Resourcefulness, how well are you able to adapt and prioritize tasks? Working with others is just self-explanatory, and written communication is the same. Do you have examples in your career or your academic background where you've shown that your written communication has been influential or impactful? And so if you have in your background maybe lots of experience where you can say, I can show my leadership, my composure, my resourcefulness, and my working with others, but maybe I don't have a lot of experience showcasing my oral communication skills or my judgment. And this is a great time to really start building those examples. Because as the gentleman mentioned, the personal narratives will ask you questions about these 13 dimensions and what they look like in your life. And so I would recommend that everyone really think through, start pulling out the examples you have in your career, in your academic career, for each one of these 13 dimensions. And if one of those examples seems a little weak or not as strong, start looking at opportunities to strengthen that example so that you will feel fully ready when it's time for the oral exam or for the written exam as well. And so here's a list of our links that we provide for more information. Careers.state.gov is our primary platform. It has all the information on salaries and testing and requirements for all of the programs I mentioned today. usajobs.gov is a great resource. It provides vacancy announcements across all federal agencies, Treasury, Education, HUD, all of the federal agencies. We also have a mobile app. The app is a very useful app to have on your phone. That we have some practice tests for the Foreign Service Officer exam. One is on the mobile app. It's a little bit shorter than the one we have online. So just take both practice tests if you're interested. And then of course we have folks like myself, diplomats in resident. I am stationed here in Miami. I cover Southern Florida, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, but there's 16 of us across the United States. And our sole purpose, as I mentioned, for this 2-year assignment, because our assignments are anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So for this 2-year assignment, our job is just to work with folks who are interested and help them with the process in becoming a U.S. Foreign Service Officer or working for state. And then of course we have our Twitter and our LinkedIn. So that sort of concludes the formal presentation. I'm going to stop sharing here. and happy to open it up to questions. I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the lifestyle, but I can speak to that as well. But I wanted to open up to questions at this time.
Great, thank you. So Lincoln, you have your hand up. There were also a couple in the chat that I'll get to, but let's Lincoln, you've got your hand. So.
Okay, hello. I just was curious. You didn't mention this program, but I was curious as to your thoughts on the Boren Awards program and if that's a good option, because I heard that it's like it's kind of a mandatory 1 year of service, like a job in the government after you get out of university. So I wasn't sure if you think that's a good idea or not.
No, I think it's fantastic. I mean, we have, what I typically like to tell folks is, if you're not coming in as a Pickering or Rangel Fellow and you're applying as a Foreign Service officer, you're applying amongst thousands of folks who are interested, and having something that is related to the Department of State, like the Boren Fellowship, is always a good look. And that is something that we will look at favorably. So definitely think about, and there are a number of language fellowships that the State Department helps work with. We have our Fulbright program that I didn't speak about today either. So definitely think about other State Department opportunities, scholarships, and fellowships. So that's a great question, Lincoln.
Thank you.
I see William. I don't know if this is in order, so if that's okay.
Yeah, I think William was next.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It sounds like an incredibly attractive opportunity. I actually applied for one of the internships. I had an interview this morning with the International Bureau of Organizations, so hopefully that all goes well.
Right.
In reference to other pathways that we can take in order to become Foreign Service officers, we did mention Pickering and Rangel, and then you just alluded to Fulbright. Do you have any others that you would like to mention for those of us that are in maybe our 3rd or 4th year of schooling and we're looking at different ways to get into the Foreign Service officer program?
Yeah, I mean, you know, William, the truth is that the only way to get into the Foreign Service, right, is to take the exam. The only programs that I'm aware of that sort of help with that process would be the Pickering, the Rangel for the generalist side, and the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship for the specialist side. Any other programs like the Fulbright program, that's going to help pad your resume when you are writing your personal narratives, when you are taking your Foreign Service oral exam, because they will give you those experiences that showcase those 13 dimensions, right? But the Fulbright isn't an exact path to the Foreign Service, but it will ensure that you have some strong substance, like Peace Corps, right? Peace Corps is another program that will give you opportunities to showcase those 13 dimensions. But the only pathway programs that we have really are the Pickering and the Rangel fellowships into the Foreign Service as a generalist. That helps. And good luck on your interview. I'm very excited. I should say, for those who are on the call, as your diplomat in resident, if you, like William, you're going in for your interview or you have some questions, is this the right office I should be interning for? What about this office? I'm happy to talk you through those bureaus and the offices to like work through any of your questions and then help prepare you for the actual interview itself. So I'm here at your disposal as a diplomat in resident in Florida. I'm sure you didn't need me, William, and I'm sure you did great. But for those who are coming up, I'm happy to help. And Konstantin, did you want to call on the next folks? I don't know if
Yeah, I think Fernando was next.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, Miss Houston. How are you?
Hi, Fernando.
So I actually have a question regarding kind of like a transition process. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my career until about 2 semesters ago. And my academic history does not reflect my potential, I believe. So something I discussed with my academic advisor that he told me to ask you about was if I can bolster my resume by going potentially through the ROTC, bolster my GPA, make connections, serve in the intelligence branch there for a few years, and then after that, apply towards potentially the Veteran Innovation Partnership, or do you have any suggestions on how I could proceed?
Wow, okay, so absolutely. I mean, that path is one way. Like I said, there's no one path, but so your academic background, the major will not preclude you from coming into the Foreign Service, but if you're concerned about your GPA, then that would be useful for the internships, but not necessarily to become a Foreign Service officer, right? Mm-hmm. So Yeah, so if you feel like you have a major that's not political science related, that's still fine. We'd still love to have you. It's just I hope I'm answering your question, Fernando. So yes, you
Yes,
can't.
yes.
I don't want you to have to join the ROTC or the intelligence community just to come into the Foreign Service. But
Oh,
if
no.
you're interested in
Mhm.
those offices, and then later you decide you want to come into the Foreign Service, then absolutely you would have great experience as a Foreign Service officer with that background.
Okay, and one more question, but it'll be quick.
Yeah.
If I want to go, because I do want to go through the intelligence branch, but when I apply from the Veteran Innovation Partnership,
Mhm.
would I go into law enforcement and security, and would I be able to transfer potentially to a public diplomacy officer down the line, or do I have to stay in one of those specifically?
Okay, so the Veterans Fellowship, right, is for folks who have an advanced degree. So you would need to get a PhD, master's degree for the Veterans Affairs
Yep.
Fellowship, right? And the fellowship is just for 12 months. It's a mentorship program, and then that's it. There's no conversion into the Foreign Service. It's just a really strong substantive mentorship program. And then after you finish the fellowship, if you wanted to work in the intelligence community, that'd be fantastic. You would come in. You need a security clearance for that, right? A top secret security clearance as well. And then when you apply to the Foreign Service, you could, at that point, you're eligible to choose any of the cones. You could be public diplomacy, you could be political, but you did bring up something that I did want to flag. If you're thinking about law enforcement, we have a law enforcement specialist track. So these are our diplomats who cover the security for our embassy. If our Secretary of State comes out to Mexico, our diplomatic security officers are responsible for their security. They work on our cybersecurity, on just mitigating risk for our diplomats, our resources, and our personnel. And so that's a specialist track, but I think that might be of interest to you. I would look up the diplomatic security specialist track. Yeah, I think that would be attractive. And let me put in my email address. Folks have questions that we don't get to today. That way, I'll get them. Okay.
Okay. Wait, did you put that in the chat?
So Nurhan was next, and she also had a question from the chat. So Nurhan.
Thank you again for taking the time to do this. So my question is, how would you have somebody prepare for the Pickering and Wrangle Fellowship interviews? So let's say we got through the interview or the application process and we're a finalist and we have the interview scheduled. How would you have somebody prepare for those?
Okay, this is a great question. And I would say what they're looking for and what I recommend people to do is really have examples of impact in your life, right? So often folks will come in and they've studied abroad, they've taught English in Japan. But for me, when I'm looking at Fulbright applicants or looking at Pickering and Wrangles, these individuals come in with they haven't just taught English in Japan, but 80% of their English learners went on to pass this really difficult English test, and now they're also English teachers. Like that impact, that influence is important. So think about ways, just joining an organization and being the president, that's fantastic. But as a president, did you take them strategically in a different direction? Were you able to advance their objectives by raising so much money? So really showcase that impact. During the interview, they're also going to ask you some general questions, right, about US history and culture. They're not looking for you to know the exact answer, but they're trying to see your judgment. How do you think through these questions? I remember for my Pickering interview, I had a question about, do you know when women receive the right to vote? Now, I did not know this specific amendment, but I did know that the 13th Amendment, of course, abolished slavery. And then I was speaking out loud. So then I was like, and I know the 15th Amendment gave Black men the right to vote. And so I said, is it the 18th Amendment? And they were like, no, it's the 19th. I've never forgotten that. But I think because they could see my thought process, then maybe that helped. But so I say that to say you don't have to have the exact answer, but just be able to sort of navigate your way through the question. And of course, follow folks like the State Department spokespeople. Right now, we have Jelena Porter, who's a deputy. She's a female. Ned Price. Follow Jen Psaki. She's still the White House spokesperson. Just to see how we speak, right, on foreign policy, because the way we speak as diplomats it's like a playbook. Everybody uses it. And so if you get used to that language, then you can use it more freely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then Michael, you got your hand.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, thank you for your presentation.
Uh-huh.
So my question is, like, once you get into the Foreign Service,
Yeah.
it's about like how they choose where you go or how you get to choose. So like specifically, like let's say hypothetically you are like a member of a certain ethnic minority that is like prejudiced against in another country, or like a member of the LGBT community where there's laws against that in like the country they want to send you. Like, how does that play a role in getting where in getting sent somewhere, and like is there ways to like avoid that? Like how does that work?
Michael, that's an excellent question. Coming in, I'll just speak for myself. I was told, don't serve in India, that it's hard for people who are darker skinned to serve in India, right? Like, now I've never served in India. I can't validate that point, but that was a rumor, right? And so, of course, that changed how I thought about my list. But the process itself, so what happens? You come into you get accepted, you pass that year of the application process, you get accepted, you'll be in a A100 class, which is our training class. You'll have 7 weeks of general training about US diplomacy and foreign policy. During that time, your class of maybe 60 individuals will get a long list of countries that have available assignments for entry-level officers, that you would be an entry-level officer. They're going to be everywhere from Belize to Afghanistan, right? Like all over, maybe not Afghanistan right now, but you get what I'm saying. What you would do is you look at that list and you would rank them, your highs, mediums, and lows. And then you will talk over with your career development officer, because your first 2 assignments are always directed. So it's a career development officer that's going to speak to you and say, okay, tell me about your preferences and why did you make these countries highs. And it could be for family reasons. It could be for what you just said. I'm part of this group and I feel like this is where I want to serve, or this is where I don't want to serve. I have these languages, whatever your reason is. The career development officer, out of the 60 people in that class, will try to ensure that everybody gets a high or a medium. They will less likely send you to a low because they want you to be effective in your country. So if you have said, this is a country that I definitely don't want to go to because of XYZ reasons, it's unlikely they're going to send you there and have you not be an effective diplomat, right? And so your first 2 assignments are directed just like that. So in Mexico, and they call it Flag Day. So, right, I've made my list, and on the day we all come in, we've got our suits on, right? And an ambassador is there and they start calling out, Mignon, Houston, and your flag, and it's Mexico. And sometimes there's screams and sometimes there are cries. It's a lot of emotions on Flag Day, right? And the second thing that happens again for your second assignment. After that, then you're at a level where you're usually tenured and you get a chance to bid on a job. It's almost like interviewing for a job. So I see my third assignment that the Philippines is open. They have this job I'm interested in. I would reach out and ask if I can interview for this position because this is my background. I feel like I'd be strong. And so you get a little more say in your jobs after the first 2 assignments. And you can do that. I worked in Mexico and then I was in Africa and then I was in the Philippines. Like, you don't have to just stay in one region. You can jump around, but you typically need to stay in that cone if you want to be promoted. So hopefully that's a long answer for your question. Hope that's helpful.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Other questions? I think there was a question in the chat from somebody who left, but they might be a good general question to answer. Is like, she asked about virtual internships. When are in-person internships going to come back, if there's any date for them to come back?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We just had a staff meeting before this presentation, and at that point, there's still no word on when the in-person internships will come back. So I wish I had more. Yeah, Konstantin, as soon as I find out, I will be keeping in touch with you to let your students know that you can pass that word on. But right now, they're still all virtual. I see a question from Sandra about would I have issues during clearance since I have family that live in Montenegro. So my answer to this is usually always, it doesn't matter the country, right? But the answer to the security questions, it depends, right? So they're definitely going to look into your background and your associations, your family, your friend connections abroad. There will also be some contact with them. I know for my security clearance, there was contact with my friends abroad. And so I can't speak to your actual situation, but I can say that folks, that is part of the security clearance. And the answer is always, it depends. I get questions like, what if I have a misdemeanor? Will that preclude me? And the answer is always, it depends on a number of factors for your portfolio and your background. Did I miss a question on the chat?
So Hector has got his hand up.
Okay. Hi, Hector.
Hey, what's up? So this is more of a, I guess, like, say a personal question, but I really enjoy asking this to people that are much more experienced than the rest of us. You know, a lot of us are still uni, still learning and growing as people, as individuals. If you could go back to the ripe age of, let's say, 2021, with the knowledge that you have now, what's something that you would tell yourself?
It's a great question. I wish I had, coming in as a Pickering Fellow, even as a graduate student, you want to make sure you want to make people feel like you have all the answers, right? Like you don't want to ask for help or ask questions. What I've learned in this job is that's important to do. If you notice someone, whether it's a student or faculty member or professional, and they are just really on top of their game, really amazing, you want to be like them, ask them for coffee. Ask them if you can sit down and like take some time and figure out what they're doing, because that's really how we become strong. I did not do that as much as I could have my first tour. And it wasn't until I got to my second tour and I was leading a team when I was like, oh, I wish I had talked to that person, because they're doing exactly what I want to be doing right now. So don't feel, this is the best time to ask all the questions. Ask people out for virtual coffees, virtual chats. If they're folks, everybody loves to talk about themselves, right? So people will want to talk to you about what they do and how they do it if you admire it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I will just say, as far as the lifestyle, I came into the Foreign Service as a single female, and I am now married with a child. And so the Foreign Service, we provide work for your spouses. We place your children in what we call a private school, which is the American School Abroad, and that's from K through 12, and that's paid for. So lots of opportunities for families. Of course, we move around every 2 to 3 years, sometimes 1 year if it's a more difficult assignment, but every 2 to 3 years, everything in your home is moved, your cars are moved, your housing is paid for. So just a great lifestyle. And then if you decide you are done and you're tired of moving around, or your spouse needs to come back to the States to work, there are jobs in Washington, there are jobs in like what I'm doing in Miami. So there are Foreign Service jobs in New York, in different places in the United States, and you can sprinkle those in so that you can get some US time and then go back abroad. You don't have to stay abroad for 10, 20 years if you don't want to. And if you decide to come out and you want to work for the private sector, you're walking away with great language skills, great global contacts. You really have networks that would be very attractive to the private sector. So I hope I have supported your goals, and you have my email in the chat. If you want to set up, I have office hours, set up a time to talk through some questions in more detail. I'm happy to do that for you as well. Oh, did it not show up? Okay, let's see here. Thank you for flagging. I think I sent it to one person only and not to everyone, because that setting wasn't.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much to Mignon. Please feel free to reach out to her in the email. This will be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you know somebody who didn't have a chance to ask a question or attend, send them a link when that pops up on the SPSIA channel. So thank you again for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Best of luck. Hope to see you guys abroad.
Thank you.